Much for staying here after this amazing and powerful musical. My name is Carolina. I work at Enosh. I'm the coordinator of the English-speaking group and the director of the Art Center. And thank you all for coming, because whether you know it or not, today serves as a fundraiser for the English-speaking group at Enosh. And the house was packed, which are really good news for all of us, right? So thank you. Thank you also to Rafael for allowing this to happen and for inviting us to join and for giving us the possibility of being here after the musical, which I'm sure needs some digesting for many of us. Before talking about Enosh, and I really thought that it would be really important that you actually get to hear from someone who receives services at Enosh. And before that, I'll just tell you a little bit. At Enosh, we provide social rehabilitation services for people who are coping with mental health issues or mental illness. On the one hand, we have Dir Mugan, or assisted living, to support independence in the community for people, coping with mental illness and them living in the community independently. We also have social groups, such as the English-speaking group and many other groups, where the focus is on belonging, forming, closer relationships with other people who might understand what it is to, have to cope with a mental illness, but also to connect to the humanity of basic friendship, of hanging out, of doing fun things together. And one of the other things that we do is we really try to have a lot of community initiatives where we try to reach out to people and allow for space for interaction and allow space for people to really see the humanity of people who are coping with X, Y, and Z, whether it's mental illness or other things. But always exchange and interaction, it's what allows stigma and the walls of stigma to fall down. So we really try to focus on those. Again, we thought it was really important. I'll be here along with Sarit, who's a social worker working in the assisted living. We'll be here afterwards to answer questions, but we really thought it was important for you all to hear from someone who receives services at Enosh. So I'm really happy to introduce Ruben, very special person that I have the privilege to work with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolina. My name is Ruvain Frank. As Carolina mentioned, I'm somebody who's receiving services at Enosh. Coping with mental illness, the only thing I would like to disagree with Rafi about is I'm not suffering from mental illness any more than I'm suffering with my high blood pressure or my cholesterol. I take medicine because my body produces too much cholesterol, and I take medicine because whatever is in my cardiopulmonary whatever that causes my blood pressure to be high. And I take medicine because somewhere along the line there's not enough serotonin in my brain, and I take a medicine to assure that there's more, and that allows me to cope with the problem that I have with the mental illness. I have been diagnosed as clinically depressed. I have some bipolarism, not anywhere near anything that you've just seen, but that's another story. Talk about that later. And I just wanted to say that, as Carolina mentioned, that it's a shame, really, that there is such a stigma associated with it, and everything that you need to know about putting into perspective what we've just seen and what's involved in that is the difference between how you feel when I say, hi, I'm coming over for Shabbos, excuse me, for a Shabbos meal this weekend, and I just have one request. I get like migraines sometimes, and like, if you just keep it down, that I really appreciate. But if I said to you, hi, I'm coming over for Shabbos this weekend, but I sometimes get clinically depressed, so if you could just keep things kind of quiet. Okay, so everybody put your shoulder blades back on your chairs and release your fingers and take a deep breath, because everybody just got really incoming, and I can't deal with that. And there was something very, very true that rang for me in that song, You Don't Know, because it's something people do not know. Although it's very interesting, for example, despite the fact, and perhaps having nothing to do with it, I don't know, that I have a mental illness. I also have a genius level IQ, and I'm eligible to be a member of Mensa, which means if we stood up the 100 people or so in this room, I would probably be the only one standing here, since my IQ is in the 99th percentile. But if I told you what he called the people in the room should stand up who have mental illness, the odds are the percentages playing the mathematical, purely statistical route is about 1 in 6. So I imagine there'd be quite a few people standing up, and it's a shame that it's not dealt with, that it's not out in the open, and that there's such a different way that people feel about it and people relate to it as opposed to physiological diseases, although, like I said, my depression has a physiological cause. I just wanted to speak a little bit about what Carolina said. Carolina is also a social worker. I go to her, the English group that she runs. She also runs an art group at Enosh. Sarit Shabbat is my social worker. I also have a madricha, somebody who's like a life coach, assistant. All the terminology in Ivrit is so much nicer somehow than things that get to be in English. I so much enjoyed being a mitmoded, someone who's coping, as opposed to someone suffering or somebody who's being rehabilitated or somebody who's like, so forth. These people, I'm very, very thankful to them. They form a big portion of what I call a Reshet Tmicha, support network. I don't fall into the bottom of the illness, way down there, where nobody likes to be. It took me a long time to learn that there's a difference between being sad and being depressed, and there's a difference between being lonely and being alone, and there's oftentimes when I'm having discussions with a social worker or my psychiatrist or somebody, and I say, is that a normal response? Do people who are normal feel like that? And some of these things, like I say, just need to be learned. Again, as I said, I'm very thankful to Enosh. I'm very thankful to you, particularly, as Carolina mentioned this evening, was very much in financial support of Enosh, something that we very, very much need. Just to tell you, that's not anybody here's fault. I mean, they're sponsored Enosh by the Ministry of Health, and that's just the way, the money comes. We unfortunately had a bit of an outburst when we kind of touched on somebody's disease a few weeks ago, and the whole thing was over 30 shekels. And I kept saying to myself, like once upon a time, 100 years ago when I was in yeshiva, the Rosh Kollel said, we should put aside money in your marriage and call that your Shalom Bayis fund. And I thought, if we had something like that, a little extra money, people donated or whatever, maybe we wouldn't have outbursts over 30 shekels because it touches on somebody's nerves. And that's all I want to say about fundraising as far as Enosh goes. As I said before, this is Carolina. She's a social worker there. And this is my social worker personally, Sarit Shabbat. I had a bunch of things planned out to say, and I'm trying to remember if I covered it all. The problem is Carolina covered some of it. All right, the Jeremy Bogan thing, right, which is which she already talked about. So, there's a fine line depending on different people. Of course, it's a spectrum. Mental illness. There are people who are very high functioning, and there are people who it's more obvious that they have difficulties. I wouldn't exactly call my living situation assisted living. I mean, my mother, who's 82 years old, is in an assisted living facility. Right, Carolina just pointed out, a lot of things get lost in the translation there, and it's interesting, again, like I say, there's such a stigma on it, even when I'm speaking with Israelis and using the Hebrew terms that we have for a lot of these functions, madrich and chonech and somech and like melaveh. Nobody has any idea what I'm talking about. These are Israelis who speak Ivrit, and they're just not familiar with the terminology, as I imagine. I really don't know in English-speaking social workers that there's a technical vocabulary as well, but it's just, like I say, it's kind of a shame that it's so little is known about it. That pretty much covers what I wanted to say. The only thing that I wanted to add, no, actually, since it's a nice small group, we can say, like, we go to questions and answers. Soon, feel free to ask from the social workers as well as myself, be more than happy to answer your questions. Speak a little Sari? No, Sari doesn't really speak English at this level. I was thinking maybe I'll translate for her, but we're okay. Carolina? Okay. Let's open up to questions, please.
Yes, you mentioned assisted living environment like residential care. How does one get in there, and how long do you stay, under what circumstances, what happens that you need to be in residential for how long?
Different people, of course, who are in the program have different requirements and different needs, and as such, the qualifications for the program vary. There's what's called Service Lets Me Toot, which is say, you're always involved with this program. Some people have to go through the process every year to have it renewed every year. Again, it's a spectrum. People develop and it changes. I do not expect to ever graduate out of the program, which is to say, I expect to be in it the next, how old am I, 59, the next 60 so some years. And I move around as I wish freely. For example, I found my own living quarters. It's just that people come to look in and see that things are going. Like I said, everybody has different requirements. I mean, when you're dealing with human beings, there's always the human factor and the unknown. What do you need? What would you like to do? So, for example, my madrija helps me with more day-to-day things. Sometimes we sit down and we make what we call a time budget. How do I budget my time? Sometimes we make a monetary budget. How I'm handling my finances. Sarita and I discuss although oftentimes technical matters that she helps me out with, dealing with some organizations, particularly since her Ifrit is better. And in addition to that, we kind of have like I wouldn't call it intense speech therapy, but I know that I can, as again, like I said, it's a link and a chain of a support group a support network that I feel very glad to have. I would just like to mention as well, I have somebody who is also helping me with work-related issues. It so happens the last job, the current one that I'm working now, I found on my own and I developed it on my own and so forth, but I did find that I eventually needed some help to smooth over some rough areas, and I'm very happy to have a new person also involved in the support network for that.
And people in Enosh, like Ruben, doesn't live in a special place. They live in a community like everybody else. They rent the old apartment. There are places, like hostel. There is people who live together in a place that.
Enosh is not just...
Enosh is living completely alone in the community.
And provides the therapy of...
Yes, exactly.
I mean, that's part of the main aims of Enosh is providing, this mix of independence with belonging. So yeah, people living in the community, it's supporting that process because sometimes it might be really difficult after, for a little bit what potentially happens, sometimes you end up in the hospital and you might be there for a couple of days, maybe months, maybe 12 their years, then you come back to the community. And then what happens and what kind of support
the way you see it, like you are going to continue, you know, and like another person might see it as like, you know, they might recover or they don't want to like stay in that label. Like,
Well, it's like they say, every man has his price, and although I'm not.
Can't hear you.
Can we get the mic? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Every man has his price, and although I'm not particularly proud of it, there's a great deal of financial support from the government as far as a rent subsidy and a monthly stipend that they pay for people with disabilities above a certain point. Again, the issue of taboo and stigma around the mental illness has been discussed endlessly. There's forums on it. If you went online, you could probably find one every day, kind of thing. It just is, like I say. I mean, again, though, is it any different from people who, you know, formed the United States Diabetes Foundation or the Muscular Dystrophy Foundation or the Paralympics or something? I mean, again, it's just kind of the way it is. I know for a fact that it literally destroyed the careers of a number of American politicians. Like I say, hopefully that will change. As far as getting out of it, again, it's like I said, you know, I intend to take my blood pressure medicine for the rest of my life, and I intend to take my antidepressant for the rest of my life. It's not something that I expect to graduate from or I will graduate from. I mean, if I hit the lottery tomorrow, I would probably say, okay, you don't have to pay me the stipend anymore or something, you know, but I wouldn't necessarily opt out. It's like they said here, you know, you can go and take your own, take your chances without treatment. But I feel much more comfortable and I sleep better when I know that there's this support network in place. There was another question there. Yes, please.
Speak louder.
How long does it take to get out of OCD once you start getting help?
It's been very interesting. She asked how long does it take to get out of a problem with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, once you start getting help. And again, there's no set rule. We're talking about human beings. It so happens I have a friend who has OCD, and he's the exact same age as I am. Literally, he's 23 hours older than I am. We grew up together, and again, he suffers with it. He deals with it on an everyday basis, and it's not a thing that you get out of. There are things he can do. Right. Okay. So again, there's a line above, like, you know, dysfunctionality and okay, now I'm functioning enough. But again, like, his wife knows that she can't send him to the supermarket.
Another question I have is there anything happening in the China right now?
Yes.
You have a different
There is a special, you know, there is a nosh in the church also, and if you want, I can give it, Caroline a card, and then when you call, we give you all the details in the church.
I just looked in the program that we got today, and I was surprised myself to find that there are 55 branches of Enosh across the country. So I assume there's one in Beijing.
Is there any such thing as hospital? Is there any such thing as hospital?
What we do in Enosh, what we do in Enosh,
Yeah.
we meet the people in their own house. Okay, we meet them in their office. Okay, what do you mean? I'm social worker. I come in the house. Okay.
She's been into my apartment, and so is my madrika. She used to come like at least once a week. You know, are you keeping things clean? You know, you make sure there's the minimal sanitary being maintained.
Can't hear you. Yeah.
There's another question here. Yes, please.
I was curious, you mentioned something about having to fill out forms every year to qualify. Who decides who's eligible for emotional distress?
I'm speaking Hebrew because
Microphone.
אוקיי. כדי להתקבל לאנוש יש דבר כזה שנקרא סל שיקום, שזה תחת... אוקיי.
Okay, here we have our Sal Shikum Totachit,
I think I better come
Pamela
and just
Perlman.
announce myself because this is a relevant point. Sorry I'm wearing a hat, I'm freezing. I'm not that strong. My name is Pamela Perlman. I am the Rakazet Sal Shikoum in Jerusalem. That means that I'm the regional coordinator for rehabilitation services in Jerusalem. Enosh is one of our many, many service providers. The state of Israel has actually been very, very positive about making a law for people with severe mental illness to access services. What you need to do is be assessed by Bitoach Leumi, and if they think that you need, you need a disability pension, and if they say we let their medical committees be our gatekeepers, but there is another way around it. But you have to have a certain percentage of mental health problems in order to access the services. But then you can come before one of the panels that we have. You can be referred by a social worker, a mental health professional, and if you don't have anyone to refer you, you can just ring up the office and we'll get you through the system. And we have panels where 3 people, one of them is me, and also have other members of staff that do these panels. We listen to you and we find out what needs you actually need to have addressed. Enosh is one in Jerusalem, for example. There are another 6 services doing the same sort of work. I'm talking about the assisted living program of Enosh. There's 6 other services doing it. We have a couple of services working with the Haredi population. Okay, and we have other services doing similar work. Enosh started out right at the beginning in 1978, I think it was. It was set up by mental health sufferer families because there was nothing. I remember when I first started working at the end of '79, when we wanted to get people out of psychiatric hospitals, Enosh was just beginning, and we turned to Enosh. There was nothing else, and it was very hard to get people out of hospital because there was no support system. But now, with the mental health law, with the rehabilitation law, and with all the very many different services that have been set up, people can live very full lives in the community. What Enosh did right at the beginning was provide leisure services, services for groups, because as Reuven said, one of the hardest things of certain mental health sufferers is the loneliness and the feeling that they're by themselves. And to be able to come to like a group, like the English-speaking group, which was actually my idea. I always have to say that because it was my idea. I said there are lots of English speakers that don't, that don't really know how, know enough Ivrit to come to the regular group. So let's set up one for the English speakers. But that's very, very important for the people that go there. So we have services, assisted living, we have getting back to work services, we have a service in the universities helping students. And this year there are about 25 students that have got the MAs, and there's a doctorate student, and they have been helped by this service. So it just helps people cope better, okay? So, I mean, if there are any questions about how to access these services, I'll be quite happy to answer people, afterwards, or find a way to get me.
I'd just like to add to that I can consider Pamela also part of the support network that I've set up. Her number appears very prominently in the Enosh waiting room when we come in, and she's kind of like the final word, Board of Appeal kind of thing in Jerusalem, and I'm very happy to consider her as part of that network.
really powerful.
Yeah.
If you think about it, but there's a lot of
Well,
humanization.
la Enosh Bina.
Second question, you mentioned there was like a spectrum of mental illness. There is obviously, but where would you put yourself in that spectrum? If you're comfortable saying.
Very hard to assess myself, but I would have to put myself amongst those who are pretty high functioning, maybe 90%. But again, I mean, in my evaluation at Bituach Leumi, they put my mental disability level at 70%. So I mean, you know, it depends. Like I said, it's also not, there, as you saw here, people with mental illness function sometimes better, sometimes worse. You know, she's not making sandwiches on the floor every day. You know, sometimes things are a little smoother. Do you have a follow-up question?
One thing to add for that, just Ruvain himself has appeared on the stage a couple of times as one of the actors in some of our shows. So he's definitely one of our favorites.
Thank you very much, Rafi, and I'd also like to thank Rafi for whatever part he had in this evening as well, because I was very much privileged to work in him. I very much feel his finger, although his name doesn't appear in the flyer, to my surprise, in the program. I'm very certain that his influence is over the entire program.
Okay, a couple more questions.
I don't want to take one if there's still some others, but.
Is there anyone else who hasn't asked a question who would like to say something?
If you feel comfortable saying so, I'd be curious to hear how you felt watching this play this evening. What did it make you feel? Yeah.
I'll tell you the truth, I had a bit of a rough time in the first act, someplace where they were singing You Don't Know, and there was some nervous laughter until I realized that it was actually nervous laughter. I thought, if somebody is laughing, then he really doesn't know. But I was, it strikes pretty close to home sometimes. There were some things here that were portrayed very, very realistically, and particularly I like to, the actors did an incredible job. I know Sandy Cash. I know Sandy Cashmore as a musician. We met at the Jerusalem Comedy Club. That's another story, but I just discovered she's quite the actress as well. But again, it was very realistic, and there's some things that really struck home. And I mean, I have never had ECT, but I knew immediately what they said. I could see the looks of confusion on a few faces, even in the dark. What, you know, and like I'm like, oh my God. It was a little uncomfortable, to tell you the truth, but on the other hand, I was very happy to that it's kind of out in the open now, which, like I'm saying, 40, 50 years ago, it'd get me in the end of a politician's career if he had somebody even in the family. I think it was Dukakis, whose wife had something, or somebody like that. And nowadays, I think it's a little better, and hopefully in the next 50 years, it'll get better yet.
I think an important point that was made, I think at the end, just at the end, they say to the husband that maybe he wants to talk to somebody. Isn't that sort of, the end's like that? And what we found, after setting up services for mental health sufferers, very quickly we set up places for family members to come to. Actually, in Jerusalem, Enosh runs it. In Milam, which actually is in Yad Sarah. Yad Sarah. It's a place for people, family members, with somebody in the family that is suffering from mental health problems. Very often it's somebody who actually does not access the services, and the families really need a place to talk to. This family service gives individual counselling and also runs groups. They have groups of husbands of wives, wives of husbands who suffer from mental illness, children, adult children of a mental health sufferer who is a parent, and I think the pain of the daughter was very well expressed. And in these family services, very often you get adult children coming and talking about what it was like growing up in the household with somebody who suffers from mental illness. And family members are very, very important.
Okay, I guess one last question. Final? Yes.
Is there anything for the siblings?
Yes.
What does,
There are group specific.
The question is there anything for siblings?
Yes, definitely.
Yes. So you can get one of my cards afterwards, and you know, I'll give you all the information about Milan and anyone. If anyone needs any information, please, my cards are in my bag, but I'll get them in a little bit.
I wanted one clarification.
Yes.
Of all the things you said about access, it sounds like a person has to go before you talk with me, and I don't know who's there, and that's a pretty frightening idea to become declared 70%. In other words, if my nephew is severely distressed, and somebody could get him to talk to somebody, how's that gonna go in front of it? You know what I mean? Can we access a social worker in front of the rest of it?
Well, from July there has been a further reform in the mental health world, and now the different Kupot Cholim are providing services. So that is a good place to begin with your family doctor. If you want to tell me, well, start with the family doctor, find out what psychiatric services the Kupa has or is developing, and start from there. Okay, so that's a good place to begin with.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that there's a social worker actually most of the Kupot now, and you can get in touch with them. I'd also like to thank everybody who stayed for staying, and I will hang around for a little bit now, but I think we really have to end it in here. We're getting kind of past the time.
Yes. And before you go, just a few other thank yous. Konkon, Ruben, thank you so much. Probably was very also special for you all, to get to hear other stories. Rafael, seriously, again, there's a calendar from the Enosh Art Center waiting for you. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you so much. Members from Keilat Yedidia who are here, thank you so much for coming and supporting. This is really, really great. For those of you who don't know, we have a community project with Keilat Yedidia, and they really rock. Like, they're always supporting us and everything. Personal thank you to all the members of the English speaking group, whether you're here or not, for teaching me so much every week. And to all of you and those who left. I really hope that by seeing this play, by getting to hear all of us, but especially Ruben, you get to think a lot about, and get to honor the decisions that people coping with mental illness have to take every day, along with their families. And it's easy to just step aside and judge everyone's behavior, but as Ruben said, and as was so beautifully sung in the musical, like, people don't know. So that's really important. And also, honor the beauty of relationships, because I think that was another powerful message here in the play. And that's a lot of what we try to do in Enosh through the English-speaking group, and our community.